This is the Move to Include podcast. I'm Noelle Evans. Mike Patterson wasn't always a disability advocate. It took 15 years after he was paralyzed by gun violence for him to learn the power of sharing his story. Today, he runs a program that supports other people paralyzed by violent crime. In his work and in his life, Mike has seen how housing can be one of the biggest challenges people face. Accessible units are scarce and affordable options are limited. And without stable housing, everything else becomes harder. Managing health, finding work, even maintaining mental well-being. Mike also talks about stigma and how it can continue to harm people from communities that are already most affected by violence. In this conversation, Mike reflects on self-advocacy and housing, where the system falls short, and what it takes to build a path forward. Mike, it's so good to have you here.
It's so good to be here. Thanks.
To start, do you mind sharing where your self-advocacy journey began?
For sure. It took maybe about 15 years into my disability for my self-advocacy journey to start. And it didn't really start until I moved from the city I was from, which is Philadelphia, to Rochester, New York.
Do you mind sharing a bit more about your personal experience?
So yeah, I had become shot and paralyzed by the time I was 18 years old. And, leading up to that, I was a troublesome kid. I was getting into a lot of trouble. And I had ended up getting myself in so much trouble that I had went to like a maximum security juvenile setting. And I was there for about 20 months. And I got out of there and I went right back to the stuff that I was doing before. So within about 2 months out of that facility, I had got shot and I had got paralyzed. Luckily, I got the 3 months in the rehab. I learned everything I could learn from PT and OT. I was faced with some stigmas and bias, but I luckily come from a unit where my mom's a great communicator, and she instilled in me that you're going to have to speak up for yourself or people are just going to railroad you. And she let me know that very early on. And I would pick up and hear the way she would talk to the doctors, and I would begin to talk to them the same way. But coming home, she said, well, what are you going to do with your life? I didn't know what I was going to do. She said, well, I think you should go back to school. And I said, okay. Now, this is coming from a situation where I had failed ninth grade, I think 3 times in a row. I just wasn't interested in school. My interests were in the streets. But I took the test. I passed. I got into school, and I was doing great. I had like a 3.5 GPA. I was doing great. Surprising myself, I was doing great. And my last semester, I had got sick, and I really didn't know what was going on. And when I went to my doctors and they checked me out, it turned out that I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had to drop out of school. And I kind of just got disenfranchised with the whole God thing at the time. I didn't feel like, paralyzed at 18, cancer by 22. I just didn't feel like he was checking for me or cared about me at all. So I lost myself in the streets for about a good 15 years. About a good 15 years I had lost myself in the streets. And one of my closest friends had got murdered. And then shortly after he got murdered, I was leaving to go out one day, and my son, who was about 13 or 14 at the time, just said, just like, Dad, be careful. I just want you to be careful. And it was just something in the way he was looking at me that told me that he shouldn't be that concerned about what I was about to go do. Made me feel like he knew what I was about to go do. And, I kind of pulled around the corner and I just said, something's got to give. I want to change. I want something to throw myself into other than what I've been doing. But what? Because when I look around, I don't see people in wheelchairs doing a whole lot of stuff. I didn't have someone to look to and say, I want to be like that guy, or I want to be like that lady. I didn't have that. And a friend of mine in the disability community up here introduced me to a program, and that was the first time that being a young black man from the inner city who had been shot and paralyzed, that people actually wanted to listen to what I had to say, actually wanted to listen to my story, actually wanted me to chime in. So it took me a while to get to a point where somebody saw something in me, invited me somewhere, and then I in turn saw something in myself and said, you know what, I gotta help other people. Becoming part of a program and getting to see that, you know what, everything I went through was for a reason. It didn't kill me, it made me stronger. And it was meant for me to help other people. So people will always say to you, everything happens for a reason, but they don't tell you it might not be 20 years later before you find out what that reason is. You just really got to fight every day and not give up. And luckily, I was able to fight every day and not give up, and found out what that reason was. And God kept me alive to do this work that I'm doing now. So that's what I dedicate my life to. I wanted to go find the individuals that look like me, that came from communities like I came from, who became paralyzed how I became paralyzed, and help them navigate the healthcare system, help them find accessible housing. If they wanted to go back to school or get a job, I wanted to be the person to kind of bridge that gap and help them do that. So those were the organizations I looked for. But the honest truth is, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me in those organizations. I didn't see a lot of people who came from where I came from and were paralyzed how I was in those organizations. So that led me to, in my mind, which was a lofty idea at the time, to say, I'm going to just start my own.
And what does that look like now?
We've been doing this for about 2 years now. It's called MPP 360, which stands for Motivating People with Paralysis. And the 360 is because we do like a holistic hands-on process where we engage folks when they're in the rehab units. We engage them when they get released. And we also try to help with their restoration back into the community, whatever they might look like, whether that's going back to school, whether that's a competitive wage job, or whether you yourself want to become an advocate for somebody now. So that's kind of the 3 tiers that we engage people on.
And what do you help them with?
Well, let's go level by level.
Okay.
In the first level, in the rehab, we go into the rehabilitation unit, we meet the individual, we meet their family, and one of the first things I look for is I'm trying to see, is this individual being treated with any stigmas or any bias?
What kind of bias, what kind of stigma?
You know, unfortunately, a lot of the time, the idea folks have is that if you're in the streets and you've been shot, then you must have done something for that to happen. So partly some of that is your fault. And that's not the case a lot of the times. So people are fighting this uphill battle in these rehabilitation units where they're just trying to get people to view them as just a person with a disability and not in this negative light that prohibits them from getting the quality health care they need in that critical 4 weeks that they're in the rehab unit. Because federally, you're only getting 4 weeks now to rehabilitate compared to the 3 months you were getting back in 2001 when I was in the rehabilitation unit. So those 4 weeks are very critical, that you need unbiased and unstigma healthcare providers. You need unbiased and unstigma PT and OT, social workers. You need the whole gamut, not looking at you in any type of unsavory light. And
setting limitations on you in that way.
For sure,
Okay.
for sure. And you know, I've gone into units and engaged guys, and you know, they say I haven't been to PT in, you know, 4 or 5 days, and I might talk to somebody and they say, well, every time we've went in his room, he's been pretty combative and he's yelled at people, so we just kind of left him alone. But I remember when I was in those units and I got combative with my PT and OT when they came to the room. I was just having a bad day. But the magic happens when they came back that second day, and they came back that third day and that fourth day, and they said, are you ready to come today? And finally, I was ready to go, and it helped me out a lot. So I don't know if people are, doubling back a lot of the times to help these individuals. Now, granted, I know some of these clinicians are overwhelmed, because when you see individuals, the same type of demographic of individuals coming in with the same injuries, your mind is starting to tell you that this just must be what it is. These people just must not care. When you continually see young black men from the inner city coming into your hospital being paralyzed from gun violence, I think the mind starts to tell them that this is just how they want to live their lives. They don't too much care. So I don't know if I can fully invest myself into caring that much when I don't think they care that much, because I just continually see them coming in on a, revolving scale. So I think sometimes they get burnt out. The clinicians themselves get burnt out with dealing with that, because they just continually see the same demographic coming in the door. And it gives them the idea that these people don't care about their future. They don't value life. And I'm not going to go out my way to continually try to get this person out the bed when I don't think they really care anyway. That's how they got here. And that's not always the case. And, people are like onions. Sometimes you have to peel back those layers to really find out what's going on with them.
There's so much to unpack there.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And that's just the first layer. That's just in the rehab. Then we jump to the second layer, which is release. So now when you come home after 4 weeks federally of being in the rehab unit, your house is not handicap accessible, because nobody can do that work in that short amount of time in 4 weeks. So you have an inaccessible home. Your social worker hasn't had adequate enough time to hook you up with any government resources in that amount of time. So you're probably coming home without any money coming into your household that would substitute if you were working from before. So you're probably coming home to an inaccessible home, no money. You probably didn't get a chance to get hooked up with a quality PCP while you were in there. So you don't have a doctor's office that you can go to right away when you get home. So these are the things that we try to help them navigate when they come home. Because if you're coming home with a new disability, the last thing you need to be doing is on the phone with the government trying to get a check, on the phone every day trying to find a doctor, on the phone calling all these places trying to see who can come make your house handicap accessible. You need somebody to step in to try to help you. And that's kind of what we try to do when you come home at the release phase. And if we're being honest, a lot of these individuals who become paralyzed, lives were in crisis before they became paralyzed. So this is just another crisis on top of the crises that they were already dealing with beforehand. And if you have family members in the house who are just not equipped to communicate and deal on that level, you're kind of left to your own devices. So that's where we come in, and we try to, mitigate some of those situations and help out, make those phone calls, reach out to the people that we know can help, and try to make this process a little more streamlined and a little less stressful on you. Mm. And then the restoration is, once we've gotten all that taken care of, then we say, now what do you want to do? Do you want to go back to school? Do you want to get a job? Do you want to be an advocate? What do you want to do? Because you have something to contribute back to your community, to society. So what is it you want to do? And let us help you figure that out. Do you want to start driving again? Let us help you drive again. Whatever that is, let us help you get to that point where you feel like my life finally has some level of normalcy that I like again. because all that is stripped away from you once you have to deal with this new disability.
So with the work that you're doing now, how much does housing come up for people?
Housing is number one. When you're talking about folks with disabilities, housing is number one. And I'll give you a few reasons why. In this country, we built for minimal compliance, not maximum independence. And what that means is that a federally funded project only has to have 5% of its dwellings be set aside for people with mobility issues and 2% set aside for people with hearing and vision issues. So if we look at a 100-room apartment, that means 5 units have to be handicap accessible for mobility for folks like myself, and 2 have to be set aside for people with hearing and vision out of 100. Now, we know in America right now, 1 in 4 Americans are disabled or have disabilities. That means 25%. So if we're only building to cover 5 to 7%, then that's the gap. 18 to 20% are falling through the gap year after year after year, not being able to find handicap accessible housing. And that's because there is no pipeline from the rehabilitation unit to a handicap accessible house, because you don't have time to get your house accessible in the 4 weeks that you're in the hospital. The waiting lists are through the roof because we're not building enough of them. So people are unnecessarily kept in nursing homes and county hospitals just simply because they have nowhere to go. There's a certain level of economic independence that comes with having a stable house, because now I'm able to go to work, and now I'm able to contribute to society. Now I'm able to feel good about myself. But that all goes back to, do I have somewhere stable to live and wash up every day? Could you imagine what it would be like for you if you couldn't take a shower every day before you came to work? Or if you had to sleep on the couch every day? How would your performance be? How many days would you call out? How long would your boss let that go on before you get let go? So you might get a job, but you might not keep it that long because you done called out so many days just because you can't get to the bathroom on your own. So housing is number one. There was a quote on my mind, and it came down to that accessibility isn't just dignity, it's economic participation. And if you can get folks to have accessible homes with stable living, and they can come out in the community and get a competitive wage job and get that dignity and that normalcy, now we have economic participation from them. Now they feel like they have something to contribute back to their community. So it hits all these intersections, and it has all these different tentacles when you're talking about the disability community and housing. They all kind of fall back on each other.
Accessible housing and affordable accessible housing.
Accessible housing and affordable accessible housing. And I'm glad you said affordable, because what a lot of folks I don't think realize is that handicap accessible housing costs more than regular housing. If you had a 3-bedroom apartment and I had a 3-bedroom apartment and we lived next door to each other, I'm paying more for my apartment than you're paying for yours because it's handicap accessible.
Almost as if that's a luxury.
Almost as if that's a luxury. So that's something that I think kind of flies under the radar.
How much of your own experience with housing is showing up in your work today?
I was fortunate enough that I had a strong enough family unit that was able to make or kind of retrofit our home and make it accessible for me, that I was able to get from floor to floor and get out of my house on my own and do things. And what I saw was that my trajectory kind of jumped way higher than my peers just because of that aspect alone, that I was able to get in and out the house, get into the bathroom every day. That led me to say, you know what, I think I want to drive again. You know what, I think I want to go back to school. It bounced me from motivation to motivation just because of that stable housing. So now when I'm dealing with individuals and I'm seeing that, for instance, I got a young friend of mine who's on his last year of high school and he wants to go to college, but he's missing a lot of days because he's staying somewhere that's not handicap accessible. So he's living in the living room. They're having to carry him up to the bathroom, or he's washing up in the kitchen. So now he's missing all these days of school in his last year, and it's messing with his grades. I've dealt with individuals who have kids. Can you imagine having to take care of a 3 or 4 year old, but you need people to still carry you up and down the steps to take a shower and carry you down the steps to cook meals for this kid? That's a difficult life. It's a very difficult life that kind of depends on other people's help. If they're willing to help you that day and they have time to help you, then maybe you can accomplish that goal. If they don't, you won't.
You had mentioned when we talked before that for you, getting housing took being unhoused in order to get on a more of an emergency list. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I can. And that's still happening now, because I just had an individual that I was working with who basically they told him the same thing. And basically what was going on was these waiting lists are extremely long for handicap accessible housing. I believe in Philadelphia, the waiting list was 9 years. So when I moved up here, the waiting list was about 3 years, which was a lot shorter than where I'm from. But I needed it sooner than that. So I had to leave a place, with a bed, a bathroom that I didn't have to share, a refrigerator with food, my family there, and I had to go live at the Open Door Mission for a month. And the Open Door Mission is not handicap accessible.
What's it like in there?
I think they do the best they can do with what they have. And I have to give them that. I think they do the best they can do with what they have. But for an individual with a disability, you're sleeping in the day room on a cot. You're washing up in the sink in the bathroom. There's no shower for you. It was rough. It was rough. But I knew that my next step had to be getting my own place. I knew I just had to get to that next level. And I guess it's not the crazy part about it, but it worked. It worked. Me being homeless for a while bumped my name up on the list faster, and I ended up getting my apartment faster. Now, the flip side to that is a lot of the handicap accessible housing that comes up faster is not going to be in the community that you're from. My family was living in Rochester, and the handicap accessible housing that came up available was in Canandaigua.
Which is about
45 minutes away. Mm-hmm. So I had to uproot everything and go out to this community where I'm not from. I don't know anybody. None of my resources are out there, just to have a place of my own. That's a hell of a trade-off. It's a hell of a decision you have to make there.
Canandaigua was also a predominantly white town as well.
Yes.
I'm wondering about that sense of belonging to being in housing.
Well, I moved into an apartment complex where it was the only other black guy was also disabled. So it was me and another disabled black guy that lived in that apartment complex, which was predominantly white, predominantly veterans also. So it was a little different. It was a little different. And it's constant reminders in the world that let you know that I was the last man at the bottom of the totem pole in life. I was black, I was a male, I was from the inner city, and I had been shot and paralyzed. Nobody cared what I said. Nobody thought I had anything to contribute to society. Nobody cared what my trajectory was. I could have flew off a mountain in a chair tomorrow, and it would have been no sweat off anybody's back. And you feel that from society.
How much of that did you internalize?
When I was younger, I internalized all of it. And I became to really dislike doctors, hospitals, judges, police, even God at one point in time. I started to despise all of it. And I know in this world we live in, there is really no such thing as fair. But I just thought, this is not fair. This is not fair. I don't understand why you can give him a prescription for pain, but I can't get one. I still have a bullet in my back. I can't get a pain prescription. I don't understand why a doctor won't advocate for me to get my hip fixed. I'm in pain. I'm telling you I'm in pain. It's dislocated. So I internalized a lot of it early on. I remember I told you I had an incident with my own primary care physician who told me he wasn't going to help me in my fertility journey because I wasn't married to the lady that I was with. So he was taking his own view of the world and bringing it into his doctor's office, and he was letting that decide how he practiced his profession on his own personal beliefs. So a lot of it I internalized when I was younger. And if I did not have as strong of a family unit as I have, it probably would have grinded me to a pebble. And I jump in and I help these folks because everybody doesn't have a strong family unit like I have. They need somebody from the outside to come in and say, listen, I'm not going to let this happen to you. I got you.
Can you talk a bit more about the folks that you work with?
So these individuals are usually from the city of Rochester. They are usually black or brown. They usually come from situations where generationally the people in their community and in their households have been kept out of a lot of things, from resources to redlining to competitive wage jobs to getting into high quality schools. So you see a lot of the same problems inside of a household from generation to generation to generation. But a lot of the people that I work with is usually from violent crimes. And it's men and it's women, unfortunately. To this day, it still shakes me when I have to deal, or help a woman out who's been through something like that, and a domestic situation where, she might got shot by her partner and now she's paralyzed. And now she still has these kids that she has to take care of with this new paralysis. And then we go back to, is the home accessible? Does she have a primary care? Is she getting a check every month? You see what I'm saying? Because life still goes on. And helping can look like a transformative outing, like taking someone who hasn't been out in 2 years to go get a haircut, because if you look better, you feel better. Or it could be a nice summer day and I take you to a Red Wings game and all the food's on me and we just watch the ball game. You know what I'm saying? Just normal stuff, because a lot of times the normal stuff gets stripped away from you with this disability life. You just can't do things normal as you used to anymore. And a lot of times we just want to just be normal. We just want to do normal. Go to a movie, go to a restaurant, go on a date, go to the beach. Just want to do normal stuff like you used to. You want some type of normalcy back. That's all.
This sort of shift in perspective and that sort of like, I guess, quote, internalized ableism too, kind of getting in the way of living your life. This idea of, I'm not normal anymore. This isn't my normal life. Mm-hmm. And yet it is... There's so much there to unpack. For sure. I you saying that reminds me of what the nurse said to my mother when I first got disabled. And she told my mom, she said, before he could do 100 things, now he can only do 99. And if folks would kind of look at it like that, they wouldn't grind themselves down so much. It's a hell of a load to carry, when you're going from able-bodied and doing all these things to the rug being pulled from under you. But if folks would realize that it's really only one other thing that you really can't do that you used to do, which is get up on your legs and walk. You still can do so many other things, and you can be
so impactful in your family, in your community, and in my own family, I try to be the one where I try to be the patriarch of my family, and I try to make it as though, the status quo is that people with disabilities need all the help. You rarely see the person with a disability doing all the helping. So I try to flip it on its head and turn it around a little bit. And anybody can do that. Anybody can do that. When I talk to folks with these newfound disabilities, one of the biggest things that stick out is that they want to talk to somebody, but they don't feel that talking to somebody without a disability is worth their time. Because how is this person going to understand like the crux of what I'm going through hour by hour, day by day with this new disability if they've never been disabled? Which is legitimate. I understand that, but I would say we need more folks with disabilities to get into the mental health space, because I don't think the proliferation of gun violence is going down anytime soon. So what that says to me is that more and more people are going to become paralyzed from gun violence. This problem isn't waning down. From the different states that I travel and the different conferences I go to and the things that I hear, this is not just happening in Rochester. This is happening in every small town USA that's affected by gun violence. If we looked at it on that scale, I think people would move a little more expeditiously to come up with some solutions.
When you talk about solutions, are there any that you have in mind?
It's a great question. When talking about solutions, it's a few that I have in mind. Starting off with, if we would incentivize these builders a little more than what the government does, I think they would build more accessible units in these apartments. Like I said, we're at 5%. We need to probably be at about 12% to kind of try to close this gap a little quicker. So incentivize the builders that are building these federally funded projects. Let's build some transitional housing from the rehabilitation unit to a transitional housing so people can get their houses situated, get their houses fixed, but still have somewhere to live where they're not stuck in the hospitals or the nursing homes. So let's get some transitional housing going on. Let's collaborate with more nonprofits like myself that know the problems, that are out here doing the work, that just could use some funds to try to start help building more handicap accessible housing. And, let's try to build some type of structure, because we just don't have a pipeline. We don't have the structure. And it's not that we need to redesign housing. We just need to build it so it can accommodate everyone. We don't really have to, build the wheel here. We just need to tweak it in a couple of spots so it accommodates everyone. Right now, just in America, the housing market isn't designed to accommodate folks with disabilities. They're very much of an afterthought. And we could close this gap a lot sooner if people would start putting them, closer in the front of their minds.
Mike, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure on my end as well.
This is the final episode of this season of the Move to Include podcast. Thank you so much for listening. For more information on self-advocacy, visit our website at movetoinclude.org. You can support this podcast by subscribing or following wherever you listen. Leave us a review and share us on social media. We're at Move to Include. This podcast is produced by WXXI Public Media.